Greetings to you all, Zimbabweans, comrades and friends. My name is Last Tamai MAENGAHAMA. I'm here to share with you my experience with the Zimbabwe justice system. As you may be aware, I have been in prison at Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison from 2011 until 2021 in June, when I was eventually acquitted. So I want to walk with you the journey that I walked as an accused person, and the harassment and the suffering that I suffered during my time. It has been a decade of suffering, it has been a decade of agony, it has been a decade of torture, emotionally, physically, and mentally. What happened is that on 29 May 2011, I was arrested when I was at my home, allegedly for killing a police officer, Inspector Petros Mtenza. That very day, I spent my time when I was attending a church service, worshipping and praising God. But of all the people in the world, the state decided to come and arrest me. So when I was arrested, I was severely beaten, I was tortured, first when I was at Harare Central Prison and later in Matapi Police Station. I was beaten to the extent that eventually I lost 2 of my teeth. We were denied access to lawyers for almost a week. When we were in cells, our lawyers could not access us. We were denied access to food. We were denied access even to our close relatives to come and visit us. So when I was arrested, my phone was taken and they go through the messages that were in my phone. So when they go through the messages that were in my phone, it was very evident from the messages that I was texting that I was not near the scene of crime, because I was actually communicating to other people, telling them that I was attending a church service. So when some of the officers noticed those messages, I was initially removed from the list of people who were supposed to appear before the court. But when their bosses came later, they then insisted that I should be included on that list simply because I was a senior member of the MDC. So it was clear from the word go that they were taking instructions based on their politics, not necessarily on the point of law. From that incident where my messages were clearly exonerating me from what had happened, it means I was not supposed even to appear before the court. The only reason why I was arrested is because I was a former councillor for that area and a non-MDC member in that area. So it is very unfortunate that our justice delivery system looks at the political color of a person instead of looking at the crime as a crime and try to find out who they have committed that crime. So it was very clear from the word go that the officers, the state, they were not interested in finding out the criminals who had unfortunately committed this crime. They just wanted to extract as much political capital from this case. So they wanted to politicize it, and this is what they did. They politicized the case. So initially when we were arrested, about 200 people were rounded up and were taken to Harare Central Police Station. So they then started to do their screening process. As I said, that my messages were exonerating me, so I was initially removed. But because of my political affiliation, an instruction was given that I was supposed to appear in court when it was clear from the junior officers who were doing the initial investigations that I was not supposed to be part of the people who were to be appearing in court as the accused person. So that is what happened. When we were then tortured, we raised that issue in court. No investigations were taken. We were actually ignored. Some of us were limping. Some of us, like my fellow colleague, had a broken arm. But the magistrate was not interested in hearing those complaints that were placed before the courts by our lawyers, that investigation must be carried out. So we were taken to prison. We were denied bail for no apparent reason. We were very good candidates for bail, that we were supposed to be given bail, but we were denied bail. So it means we stayed in remand prison for close to 3 years, just suffering, and our trial was delayed. The state was doing delaying tactics, and the court was allowing the state to do delaying tactics to our disadvantage. So it ended up our trial taking unjustified and unreasonable long time for 5 years. It was only finalized after 5 years. And for the greater part of that 5 years, we were in prison, languishing, experiencing all sorts of suffering. It was very unfortunate that the basic procedures that were supposed to be followed were not followed. For example, there was no indications taken. We were not taken to the scene of crime for indications. There was no ID parade that was taken. For such a serious case, and at a court like the High Court, we expect that the judge was supposed to insist on those basic procedures to be taken so that the whole trial would be credible. We were surprised when the presiding judge allowed dog identification, which was dubious and which was not proper. We also had a situation where the state had no credible witness, so they ended up coaching some of the police officers and telling them what to do. So they appeared before the court and lied. And it was clear that the state witnesses were lied. They were lying, and it was clear that they were taking instructions from the PP. But the judge went on to allow such evidence to be admitted in the court. So this is very unfortunate that at a court like the High Court, it was being conducted like it's a village court, allowing things like a dog identification. So that is very unfortunate. It is very clear that the way the judge was presiding, he was not interested in any evidence that could exonerate us. He's a man who was on a mission. He's a man who just wanted to convict us. He's a man who wanted to run with the narrative that MDC is a violent party, that MDC is a part of thug, that MDC is a part of murderers. So he was very desperate to ensure that we are convicted, although it was very clear from the word-go that we were innocent. You could even tell from the political language and political terminology that the judge was using, that the judge was actually pursuing a political agenda. Even one is to read the judgment of Justice Bunu. It was very clear that it was not a proper legal process that was looking at the law as it is. So that is very, very unfortunate. Our justice delivery system has been captured. It's very evident from our case that our judiciary is not independent. Our judiciary is merely an extension of the executive. We know that there is supposed to be separation of power, where there is the executive, where there is the judiciary, where there is the legislation. But our justice delivery system here in Zimbabwe, that separation of power is not there. You just have the executive being in charge of the judiciary and also controlling even the parliament. So it means as a country, we are in a very difficult situation. I would like to opinion that from 1980 to 2000, at least our justice delivery system was somehow credible. But in 2000, there was an onslaught against the judiciary. When Namasha was appointed the Minister of Justice, and was used as a Sun-PF hitman to destroy our judiciary. And since then, even if you look at the appointments to the judiciary, they are not based on competence, they are not based on experience, but they are based on partisanship. You need to be a Sun-PF to be promoted to the judiciary. So at the end of the day, what we have, we are now having political activists, specifically Sun-PF activists, masquerading as judges, masquerading as PPs, masquerading as court officials. And this has resulted in innocent people like us spending close to a decade in prison when we were not supposed even to spend a second in a police cell. It is because our state institutions, and the judiciary is not an exception, have been captured, have been politicized, have been Zionized. So I think going forward, we really need as Zimbabweans to ensure that the judiciary is depoliticized. The judiciary is de-Zionized, and our constitution is followed. For example, section 69 of the constitution gives every accused person the right to a fair trial. But that right to a fair trial was not given to us simply because we are perceived as opponents of the state. So we now have the Mnangagwa regime is now perfecting the art of using law as an instrument, as a weapon to silence opponent, to deal and to oppress the Zimbabweans. So instead of one expecting to get justice, to be protected by the justice system, but the justice, the courts are now in an arena where one is to be humiliated, where one is to be harassed, where one is to be tortured. We can even give an example of weaponised. His crime is just exposing the corruption that is taking place in this country, and they are now using the courts to harass him. He has to appear in court almost every day. He has been taken to prison several times. So we have got numerous examples where the current regime is using our justice delivery system as an instrument, as a weapon to harass and to oppress the masses of Zimbabwe. So this is something that we really need to ensure that as Zimbabweans we say no, and we insist that our judges must be professional, our courts must be professional, they must be independent. I know we also have some judges who are credible, who are prepared to deliver justice as it is, but there are no measures to ensure that they are protected. It's not everyone who is Zionized in the justice system, because we have got one or two cases where we can point where fair judgment have been released. For example, our Supreme Court ruling is an example where those 3 women did their job professionally and just articulated the law as it is, and it resulted in us being acquitted. But very few judges would be able to take that risk, because at the end of the day, they'll be victimized, they may lose their job, they may even be maimed, or they may even be killed. So we really need to ensure that as Zimbabweans, we protect the judges who want to do their job, and our constitution must be interpreted in a professional way. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that when one appears before a court, he expects his rights to be protected. Our courts should be the place where we must feel safe. Our courts must be the only place in this country where we must feel protected. But that is not what is obtaining right now. Actually, our courts, instead of protecting us, they are on the forefront of violating our rights. In our case, the only reason why we are being harassed is because we are members of the MDC. It's not a crime to belong to a political party of your choice. So I think that is an issue that the court was supposed to make it very clear from the beginning of the trial, that we are not being tried because we are members of the MDC. Because Section 70 and Section 58 provides for right of assembly, right of association, and the right of belonging to an organization of your choice. So when you go through our court proceedings, there is a continuous reference of MDC, this MDC, this MDC, that. So it was like they were not necessarily trying to find who committed that crime. They were trying to find the MDC people. You know, when they were doing the screening, they were just using the criteria of whether you are MDC or not MDC. Most of the people who were actually at the police station, whether they were members of the MDC or not, those who said we are not members of the MDC were immediately released. But some of us who proudly said we are members of the MDC, we were punished for that. So in a way, the court was violating our right, our freedom of assembly, our freedom of association. And also when we are tortured, it means Section 53 was violated, where we are not supposed to be tortured for whatever reason. Even for those who would have committed various crimes, they are not supposed to be tortured. The law must take its course. It was even worse for us. We were innocent, we committed no crime, but we were tortured. So when we raised that issue with the courts, we were expecting the court to send a clear message that they would not tolerate a situation whereby someone is tortured when he is under the custody of the police. But they allowed the police to get away with it. So that is unfortunate that the courts that are supposed to protect us are actually on the forefront of violating those rights. So it is very, very unfortunate that we have such a justice delivery system. It is a shame to be associated with such a justice delivery system. We really need a complete overhaul of our justice delivery system. We also need to revisit some of our laws, because they are being created specifically to be used as an instrument. You know, since Mnangagwa assumed office, he has been busy trying to introduce various laws that are not in the interest of the country, that are not in the interest of the people of Zimbabwe, but that are there to save his own interest and the interest of his party. So what we are witnessing is not a rule of law, but a rule by law. Currently, we have got this constitutional amendment number 1, constitutional amendment number 2. When you look at why are they pushing for these amendments, It's for their own selfish interest. So that is the tragedy that we are facing in Zimbabwe. We really need a complete overhaul. We really need a depoliticization of our justice delivery system. I could have been dead by now when the Justice Bono was reading his judgment against us. He actually made it clear that we were proper candidates for execution. We were supposed to be sent to the gallows. He actually suggested that he was doing us a favor by not sending us to the gallows, simply because there was a woman amongst us. So we could have been dead now. We could have been executed for a crime that we absolutely know nothing about. Only 10 years later, to be found out that after all, we were innocent. We were not supposed even to be convicted in the first place. We were not supposed even to have been arrested. We were not supposed even to have been tried to allowed to go beyond the state case. So we have a justice delivery system that is the potential to murder and kill innocent people, manipulating the law. It would appear to the generality of Zimbabweans that probably it is the law that has been applied. But when it's not the law, it is politics that is being applied and they are hiding behind the law. So we are now having a situation whereby the law is now used as a political weapon. It's now used as a political weapon where the current regime has found it necessary to use the law to silence its perceived political opponents. He used the law to silence Zimbabweans. He used the law to curtail the freedom and the rights of the people. So every day we have a misinterpretation even of our constitution. The idea is at the end of the day, Zimbabweans must be reduced to people who have no rights, to people who have no freedom. That is not the idea why a justice system is put in place in the first place. A justice system is put in place so that there is order, is put in place so that people are safe, is put in place so that people are protected. But here, our justice system is doing exactly the opposite. Our laws are used to torture people. Our laws are used to harass people. Our laws are used to perpetuate partisan politics. Our laws are used to perpetuate corruption. Our laws are used to perpetuate racism, tribalism, you name it. It's all being done in the name of our laws. So it's a misnomer, it's something that should not be accepted. It's something that should not be tolerated. It's something that we should say no to as Zimbabweans and make sure that we have a law that is there to save the interests of our country, to save the interest of our people, to save the interest of our future generation, not just a law that is being created for a partisan interest. We remember that's why at one time they wanted to change the age limit for presidential candidates. So we now here have a situation whereby they have realized that politically they cannot contest and win. So they are now trying to see how they can use the law, how they can change the age limit, how can they change this and that. So this is what we have been witnessing. I also gave an example of Opuo Chungono. See, they've been trying to curtail his freedom and so on, using the law, taking him to prison, making sure he's appearing before the courts every day. So to an innocent, ordinary people, it may appear as if we are a constitutional country, we are following our laws, but the motive is not good. It is ill motives. And the judges, you remember one of the allegations, one of the accusations that is being given against the former Chief Justice Luke Malaba is because he was interfering with the judgments by fellow judges. He would insist that every judgment I have to see it. You see, that is a clear example where the independence of those judges is taken. And when the independence of a judge is taken, it means the independence of judicial is also taken. So our judges, our prosecutors, all court officials, they must be allowed to exercise their duties freely, without fear, without favor, without fear that they may lose their job, they may be intimidated, they may be harassed. But that is what is being happening in our country. The executive, this regime, this local regime is doing a disservice to our justice delivery system. Thank you.